So the second session is look beyond theme and look beyond our traditional approach. And the title is Promoting Financial Education for Consumers. To some extent, it's related to what we have discussed, the previous session, consumer protection issue, but more fundamentally, consumers' education. And consumer education is critically important for not only emerging markets, but developed markets, so all insurance markets around the world. And excellent panelists. So my role is to introduce our panel moderator, Norma Alicia Rosas. Norma has been long-serving IAIS EXCO members and now president of Mexican Insurance and Surety Authority. She is also chairman of ASAL and OECD. So she has a lot of important international role and regional chairmanship issue. So Norma, I appreciate you leading this panel. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much. I'm going to present our panelists. You have the complete bio in the app that I am sure that you have in your telephone. So I am only going to mention the names and the titles. Our first panelist is Brenda Good. She's professor from the Department of Financial Planning, Housing, and Consumer Economics at the University of Georgia. The second panelist is Mimosa Kasi. She is the Deputy Executive Director and Board Member of the Albanian Financial Supervisory Authority. And Antonis Malagardis. He is the Program Director of the HIS Framework Promotion of Propor Insurance Market in Asia, Philippines. So we have three important persons to talk about an important issue that Joshi just mentioned, because you know that improving financial education has become an essential means towards greater economic, social, and financial inclusion, and is an integral part of financial reform to prevent future crises. In many countries, we are very worried because there is a low level of penetration of insurance, and financial education is critical to restore trust and confidence in the insurance system. So this is why we welcome this effort to try to increase financial education. And when we talk about financial education, we have many words in mind. It's a combination of awareness, knowledge, skill, attitude, and behavior necessary to make sound decisions, and sound financial decisions, and ultimate to achieve individual financial well-being. So I am going to ask some questions to our panelists, and I would like to ask you, what is your definition of financial education? Can we begin with you, Brenda?
Yes, thank you very much. So as background, let me say that I'm a consumer educator and a consumer researcher. So I'm not a professor of insurance or risk management, and because I am a consumer educator, I don't think about how to design products or how to sell products. I think of this in the way that consumers do. What do I need? Why do I need it? How do I achieve this? And so financial education, in the way that I design and deliver that, refers to a variety of concepts, as she just mentioned. So most of us think of knowledge, and if we think of knowledge, then that's just includes general knowledge. Even if my topic is insurance, I still want to think about more general information, such as how this insurance product fits in with my other financial strategies. It's also means imparting information, maybe specific information about a product or the sale of that product, sometimes in the form of something we call a disclosure. I believe financial education must also address attitudes, whether consumers see the product or the use for that product favorably, and then what are the behaviors or the skills that I need? If I have made a decision to take some action, what do I do? How do I do it? Who can help me to do that? I would also make one other distinction, that financial education can be either formal or informal. So in a formal education setting, we typically think of that in a classroom, but it might be online. But I think the important distinction is that there are teachers and learners, and the learners aren't the teachers. In informal education, very often those roles are blurred. It's not clear who the teacher is and who the learner is. And sometimes that can be more effective than formal education.
Thank you very much. Mimosa, maybe you want to share with us your understanding about financial education. Maybe you like a supervisor. What do you mean?
Actually, I think that financial education is a process. It's a long process of providing information to the consumers and to the general public to make them, to improve their understanding in financial products, concepts, risks. And the aim is to have more confident consumers. They should be aware of the risks that might be covered from an insurance policy, their opportunities, the benefits that they might have through an insurance policy. And of course, they should be able to make well-informed choices. The aim is to empower the consumers, to make them aware of their responsibilities, of their rights, to make them know where should they go if they want to complain or if they need any assistance. So this is a very long process and a diversified one. As Brenda said, of course, it might happen in the schools, it might happen at the universities, it might happen online, but it's important to have a long process to have positive and last-longing effective outcomes. In Albania, we have a very small market. Our market is relatively young, and the insurance industry. The concept has been introduced and developed in less than 27 years. We do not have this insurance tradition, and the people are not aware of the benefits that brings the insurance. The market is concentrated on compulsory products. Around 62% of the market is compulsory. Motor insurance, mainly MTPL, and a lot of work is to be done towards voluntary products to develop the market and to make aware the consumers for the risks that might be covered from an insurance policy and the benefits that he might have.
Thank you very much. Anthony, I know by your experience that you have been working a lot with the insurance for the poor and also microinsurance. What is your definition, or do you think financial education is also necessary for these kind of products?
Yeah, definitely. Maybe it's more needed for the low-income people, because those who can afford insurance, if they belong to the middle income people, of course they know better. No, you don't need to start from the beginning. So for us in the German Development Corporation, and we're working in 7 countries here in Asia, working with the supervisors, and one of the topics is to create more awareness about insurance, is that we have to define between financial literacy, education, which is a long-term topic, is about changing behavior. Then comes the insurance awareness, so the people need to know that there is insurance, right? And they have to realize the need for insurance. There might be products out there, they might not know them, but they may not feel that they need this insurance, or they may not feel that they can afford the insurance. And the last part, which is actually the role of the insurance companies, is to approach these people with the affordable, accessible, and simple products. And there is not so much the role of the financial education, which is a long-term view. These people need now the assistance. They pay today, and if possible, they want to get something back tomorrow. If they have to wait for 1 year and they don't get back, they might not buy more insurance. So this is the concept, yeah, they have in their minds that they have to get something back. And there is insurance literacy. The insurance literacy is actually in the hands, or should be, in the hands of the insurance companies, even brokers, etc. And they have to look into the products. They have no time to change the minds. So the minds have already to be changed at different levels. And then comes the insurance. So from German perspective, also in this development cooperation, we look into a mixed approach. Financial literacy, starting this to understand the concepts, then we move into the need for insurance. We have to convince them that they need insurance, and only then we have to show them products. And the products have to be there. They cannot wait for 6 months for the appropriate product to come in. These are trainings for a couple of days, and then the insurance companies shall be in the corridor marketing their products. That's the way we look at it.
Thank you very much. I understand that every day the people is talking more and more about financial education. But this concept is changing, maybe in the world. In the case of my country, in the case of Mexico, financial education is something that has to be enhanced, not only for educate the people, but also because it's very important to have more inclusive people in this kind of products. So the president of Mexico asked to the legislator to change the law to include a particular goals regarding the financial education. So it is very interesting because we consider that it's a commitment that has to be improved, and we are changing some laws, not only the insurance law, but the banking law, and also it has to be with the, as you mentioned, with the schools, because it's something that is a process that takes a long time. What do you think, Brenda, regarding this issue? Is the same concept that we used to have in the past, or we need to mention something in addition?
So as you said, worldwide, I think there's interest in improving this thing that we call financial literacy, that I think, again, many people focus just on knowledge when they think about financial literacy, but it has to be broader than that, including the concept that I have to have access to the markets and the products that will enable me to put into practice what I might have learned. In the United States, each state is responsible for the rules and laws that affect what is taught, but more than half of our 50 states do require some type of financial literacy that be taught sometimes from the beginning through the end of a student's public education. In, I think, 2 states, there's some mandates about college students learning about this. But I want to emphasize that this is money management broadly. So even if the notion of insurance or risk management is mentioned, it's only a component of financial education. And that's realistic because most insurance decisions are a part of a larger decision, buying a home, buying a car. And very honestly, the insurance component is not always the most important part of that decision. So it's hard. I find it difficult to get consumers to pay attention to the insurance piece of this, but I think making people more knowledgeable broadly gives them the tools that they need when they are introduced to insurance education.
Thank you very much. Mimosa, can you share your experience in Albania?
So the experience in Albania is more or less the same with that in Mexico. So the aim of the financial education is twofold. First, to raise awareness of the general public, to make them aware of the benefits of the insurance, to make them aware that there are risks that can be covered from an insurance policy, and to increase the number of the population involved in insurance schemes. One other reason is to empower the insurance consumers so that they are part of the insurance schemes, to make them aware of their rights, of their responsibilities, to make them aware that there are ways to go and to go for assistance, and the role of the authorities in consumer protection, which is, and I think financial education is a strategy for consumer protection. Of course, according to the law, there are a lot of provisions for that, for consumer protection, but regulation alone might not be sufficient to protect consumers. So financial education is very important. In the Albanian case, it's the authority, the leader of this process, but of course involvement of other stakeholders is required, including here, yes, other public institutions or associations as well. So these are two main goals. So to empower the existing consumers and new ones to be included in the schemes and to know the benefits of insurance product.
Okay, thank you very much. And you mentioned that it's important to let the people know that they are facing some risks and they have the solution or some cover, some covers of insurance that can give a solution for the problems. But it's interesting. I'm going to share something because we recently have in Mexico one earthquake, and it's interesting because in Mexico City we have a huge penetration, a huge. This is not really huge, but compared with other parts of the city, that there are no insurance. Indeed, in Mexico City, we have more or less 6% of penetration index, but in the other cities, in the other places where they have suffered some claims, also maybe it's a very, very tiny piece of the cake. And the people is expecting that the insurance can cover that. But the problem is that they don't buy insurance. So considering this, your experience, do you think that also the financial education can be useful for another kind of more sophisticated products, or like catastrophic?
When we, maybe most of us here have a household, right, a family asking for insurance, but definitely insurance education or even insurance awareness is broader. No? We are looking into insurance for small, medium enterprises. We are thinking about microfinance institutions. They have a portfolio. When there is high default, who will pay that? There is no insurance, mostly in the developing countries, in place. And we're also thinking about the disaster risk insurance at the moment. It's not only the state. The state faces big fiscal burdens there, and of course they might provide some relief at the end of the day, but this relief is a small amount and they are not well distributed. So there is a role there for the private sector, no? Even the insurance companies, to come up with products that are simple again, but they can complement also disaster risk management with a good risk mapping, and come up again with products which a small amount might also be a big alleviation of people who are suffering a landslide, or they lost their roof over their house, yeah. So they have an insurance, and or they lost their beloved ones, so, and there is no documentation, everything is lost. So there should be a mechanism there, of course, to pay out immediately, with some more flexibility from the regulator's point of view, the payouts, which is sometimes a bit more restricted, as we know. There are few countries in the world where they allow to pay out after natural catastrophes even happen, and the people are lost if more than 10 or 20%. Some of them need the whole documentation before they can pay out, yeah? Because the reinsurer will not pay back if this is not fulfilled. So there are a lot of attempts at the moment, and awareness about this disaster risk insurance should be there, should be done, and the products, however, are more complex there. Look into index insurance versus indemnity. Who will, a simple farmer will not look to the satellite data. He just sees the loss that happened to him, and you tell him, oh, you know, you lost everything, but that's all the amount we can pay you, which is 10% of your loss. But next time might be opposite. Others might have lost much less, and they get more money. This is the pro and contra of index insurance, where I understand the IAIS is also promoting an application paper to be through A2II, access to insurance initiative, to be ready for circulation sometime early next year. So I understand the regulators also look into these issues, but again, insurance literacy is important. These products in the hands of the insurance companies have also to be brought in a simple way, consistently, to understand. And I'm sure that in 5-10 years, the disaster risk insurance will be well established, as is the TPL or motor insurance nowadays.
Thank you very much. In this sense, Mimosa, do you think that there is a relationship between financial education and market development?
So I would like to add that there are also other reasons for low insurance, such as insurance culture, low income that impacts the low levels of insurance. In my opinion, the financial education and the market development are related to each other. In the case of Albania, as I mentioned before, the market is underdeveloped. We have still low penetration rates. In the recent years, in the last 10 years, the penetration rate has been doubled from 0.5 to over 1%. But anyhow, in absolute levels, we are still low. And of course, the lack of information is one of the reasons, but not only, but also the lack of insurance culture and also the low income in the level of the country. So the market is concentrated on obligatory products, And the perception of the public for insurance, or MTPL, which is the main line of business, to some extent is that insurance is a tax. And this is something that we should change. So when it comes to buy a voluntary insurance, they do not accept it. They do not accept it because they do not know the benefits of that. They do not know that they need it for risk coverage. So it's also important to have products in the market, to develop it and to have financial education. Now in the Albanian markets are more health insurance, are more life insurance, and this is a very positive development. And of course, financial education is more effective. If you do not have products, what is financial education going to do? So, in my opinion, financial education impacts the development of the market, and they are related to each other. At least in our case. In the Albanian case, we have seen that. So the development of the market towards voluntary products is very crucial for the development of our market, and financial education will support that.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Regarding some financial education practices, if we assume that financial education is about improving the knowledge of the customer to improve their attitudes and behavior in the use of these kind of products, what do you consider are good practices to enhance financial education, Brenda?
So let me start by referring to something that's called behavioral economics that's been introduced in a number of financial education programs. And that just means, putting very simply, that I may know what I should do, but I have inherent biases that stop me from doing it or slow it down. So instead of, acting on the knowledge that I've received, I go to a movie instead or do something that's fun. So realizing that people may or may not put this knowledge into practice, and designing education programs that encourage them and help them to do that, I think is really important. And that starts with knowing your audience. So you cannot teach different groups the same things in the same way and expect the same outcome. You just will have different outcomes because they are so different. I would also say being realistic about your goals and knowing what your goals are. A single contact with a consumer in a financial education program is very unlikely to produce a behavior change. Financial education is lifelong learning, and a single contact may do nothing more than, if you're really successful, in changing attitude. So now they are interested in having more knowledge and interested in putting that knowledge to practice in some way. And I would also remind you that consumer education is not the answer to every market problem. It is not always the case that consumers can use that information because the market is not competitive, for example. So there may be instances where that doesn't produce the outcome because it wasn't the solution to the problem.
Thank you very much. Mimosa, do you want to share what are the good practices that you consider are important to improve financial education?
Yeah.
Or
Yeah.
Antonio?
Yeah, go ahead.
Yes, please.
Yeah. Well, I mean, we have limited time here, but what comes to my mind in this sense is that we have to make sure that there is a we call them interagency, no? A good interagency communication, because everybody speaks about financial inclusion. Almost all countries, at least in Asia, almost all of them have a financial inclusion strategy. What is financial inclusion? Is to bring deposits, bring savings, yeah, bring credit, and bring insurance, remittances down, yeah, to everybody, no? For all. So insurance is part of financial inclusion. And I believe that if the financial education and the insurance also awareness is part of this major strategic path of financial inclusion, we raise the possibilities that insurance is well embedded into this, because so far it was more credit, more loans and deposits, and insurance came actually in the last 10 years, 12 years in the at least in Asia, but also in South America or other parts in Africa. So embedded into the broadened strategies of each country, and you will have more synergies, you will have more, you will be more effective, because financial education is costly. Don't forget that, yeah? And why we have always complaints is because there's not enough funding there. No, I don't know any country that has launched a nationwide financial education. Look on the OECD studies, yeah? There's a lot of benchmarking there, but there is improvement throughout the countries, but there's still a long way to go. Now, to say that one country managed to improve the financial education levels, including insurance, in the last 10 years, considerably. This is probably in the next 10 years or 20 years to be done. So a long way ahead.
So I think that the approach of financial education is different for different countries. First of all, it depends on the size of the country. It might not be the same in a small country and in a huge country. For our case, for the Albanian case, I think it's more suitable, the traditional approaches are more suitable. Till now, we has been focused on transmitting information to the general public and to the consumers in different ways. So we have, through the website, we have other communication ways with consumers through free toll number, through SMS number, free SMS number, a dedicated email address for consumers for their complaints. But now we are organizing our work on financial education according to the target groups. So, for example, our target groups are the university and high school students, or professional groups, households as well, and evaluating the needs for each group. It's very important to choose then the effective approach for each of them. For example, at the universities, we have signed several memorandum of understanding, organizing open lectures at the universities, as well as in the high schools. With households, we have a new way of communications, sending, so we are planning to send greetings card with brochures and a lot of information which are valuable for them. And media briefings with journalists is another way how we are going to approach in that direction. So it's important to select the right approaches for the target groups. And of course, it's a challenge. It's a challenge to manage the costs and resources that are required to do that. I agree fully with Antonis. So this remains a challenge.
Thank you very much. Brenda, do you want to share something? Because you have a lot of experience measuring.
Yes, so I would just add, while I agree that financial education is expensive, financial ignorance is quite expensive as well, and we don't typically measure that very well. I would also say that as someone who's spent a lot of time doing research about evaluation of outcomes of financial education programs, don't be discouraged if that's difficult to do. It is very difficult. The very best evaluations require tracking individuals over time because I need time to put into place the behaviors that I may have decided based on your education that I should be engaged in. So it's quite a challenge. I would like to add that balancing this, that for those populations who are online, that's a very low-cost method of delivering education, information, knowledge, and even, again, some of the behavioral economics influences, so I may be able to stay in touch with the consumer and encourage and support when they set goals and achieve those goals. But I find it even more challenging to evaluate the outcomes of those types of behaviors because the individual who is online can be entirely anonymous. And I really don't even know, in that case, how many people I've reached.
Thank you very much. It's also very interesting because I consider that we are also moving from the traditional approaches, giving financial education through an agent or through an insurance company or through the banking employee. We are moving through this new technology and the digitalization and so on. Maybe it's different considering the development of the countries, but I suppose that, for example, in the United States, as you mentioned, there are a lot of people that don't want to meet or to talk with an agent. What do you think about this?
Yeah, I do think it's quite different culturally. So within the U.S., it's even different by generations. So our youngest generation would just say, I can apply for a credit card online. I don't need anyone to help me do that. I can be approved instantly. Why can't I do that with insurance as well? While older generations may still value the personal touch, that just makes it harder for all of us to tailor, I think, our approaches based on what works and understanding that different things work for different groups.
Thank you. I have seen some studies that mention that by increasing the access and the use of these innovative, low-cost financial tools and applications, there are a lot of new opportunities to increase the penetration of the insurance also. This also has not some challenge, not only for the consumers, but also for the governments and for the politicians, because we have to face another kind of risk that there are emerging with this new technology. But I think that we need to also try to use this technology to educate the people. So maybe we can manage with some apps or some internet videos to try to push the financial education. Are you considering something in your countries? Or have you seen something like that?
So I agree that the information technology and innovation makes it necessary to think about new ways and approaches to financial education. I can say that we have introduced some new social media. We have, in our authority, we have a very nice Facebook with a lot of information on our activities, information for the general public, for their rights. We publish brochures and so on. So, and we see that the number of the visitors in that page is increasing, has been increasing steadily. But I would say that for the case of my country, still the traditional approach is more suitable. The people in my country still wants to see someone in personal, to meet the intermediaries or to meet the people in the company, to talk to them. So we are still not in that stage to go for other highly innovative approaches. But of course, it is very, very different, and it is different from a country to another.
Thank you.
If I may add here, it depends, I mean, what's the role of digitalization now in this discussion on web, on which level we are talking about. The financial education itself, I believe, needs more intensively to be used through online, etc. It doesn't happen so much. What happens a lot through apps is the initiative of insurance companies to do their marketing of products, and where you see most apps are used for clicking and buying insurance. You don't click to know what is risk protection, how is Malaysia, what is the health insurance scheme in Malaysia. They are not going to look for that. They're looking for health insurance, for their property, for their kids, for tuition fees, whatever these companies offer. So this is where we make more use. So we may try to also advocate for using more the online or application, web, and not only mobile, yeah, and also apps without connection. Most rural areas have difficulties in connection, so you cannot rely on internet connection. You have an app which is not connected, right? They connect once, maybe a day, or through friends who have a good access to that, and that might also work. So we have to create more and more advocacy for using the media, social media, for the purpose of education, yeah? Because insurance companies, brokers take care of their apps in order to be able to promote their products and, of course, make business.
Thank you very much. In your opinion, which are the best parties, or what are the parties that are best positioned to give financial education? And Anthony, do you think, who are the best parties, who are the best persons or the best intermediaries, or who has
Yeah,
to?
understood. Yeah. Well, I mean, I don't know who is the best. We do know that one alone cannot make any change. Insurance company needs the right distribution channels. If they don't have the right distribution channels, mostly for the low-income people, the product will still be expensive. Yeah? Then they do need, of course, brokers, or they need agents who have a particular knowledge of these low-income people. You cannot sell somebody who was only in the downtown Malaysia selling here insurance, yeah, in Kuala Lumpur, to send him in a province, yeah, and sell insurance there. It's a different attitude of people. So they need to be aware of that, and there is in some countries like Philippines, etc., there is a bit of a separate license given for agents or even brokers if they want to sell insurance, which is called micro insurance, so formal insurance with low premium and low coverage. So there is a combination, I would say, of factors that make this ideal or preferable solution there. And it has to be clear from the regulatory point of view, but also clear from the intermediaries' point of view, what are the requirements to be involved and have efficient, effective advocacy on for risk transfer, which is insurance.
I think in terms of financial education, I think about specialization within coalitions. So there should be probably more integrated efforts across that involve insurance supervisors, insurers, consumer associations, as well as those of us who are educators who actually know how people learn and how to teach. Each of those has a very important role. The supervisor can influence policy, can more often bring together these different partners in the coalition. The insurers have current knowledge about how the market works that educators may not have because their education is stale after a week or a month or certainly a year. And so I think that combination of individuals who bring their specialty to that group effort is the best approach, in my view, to educating consumers about insurance.
Thank you.
So I think the regulators and supervisors' work is very important in financial education, which also fits with their mission to protect policyholders. But equally so important is also the role of the insurers in the market and the intermediaries. They are in touch with the people. They are in touch with the consumers. So their role starts at that point of time when the people go to sign the contract, and it lasts during the whole validity of the contract. They should give them any kind of information that might be necessary and required by them. And they should be very clear to the consumers. The contract should be in a very simple and clear way so that the consumer is fully aware of what is he buying and what is he signing. So I agree with Brenda and with Antonis that all stakeholders in the market have a great mission to be clear with the clients and to make them available a lot of information and clear terms and conditions of the contract. But also, the associations are very important to be included, as well as other public institutions. For example, in our case, one of our main challenge is the introduction of insurance topics in the curriculums in the high school. And so it's the support of the Ministry of Education is much appreciated in that sense. So, thank you.
Thank you. Maybe we have some time for questions. Please, Julie. Oh, yeah, he's right here.
My name is Yulia. I don't know if it works. My name is Yulia Čvikova. I'm from National Bank of Slovakia, and firstly I would like to thanks Brenda for the motivation not to be frustrated if the long-term financial education then doesn't bring the appropriate foods. I have some question maybe for you, Brenda, like the academics, but maybe also for the rest of you. What is about the responsibility of the habitants or clients, because we discuss who have to deliver them the information, how to make arrange the process of the financial educations, but very often we try to, if the system is more or less working, if some curriculum exists in the whole government system, because I think that the financial education have to start since the childhood, and all other institutions are complementary. But experience are that if the habitants is a little bit provocative, receive something more or less free of charge, that they don't want to hold their own responsibility. And I would like to hear your personal opinion, how deeper involved the people who was the government or the company invest the money for the education, but they don't want to let's take the lesson learned. Thank you.
If I understand your question, just a couple of responses. So I said, I think financial education is lifetime learning or lifelong learning, and I think we have more agreement about starting early than we do to say, and we have to keep learning for our entire lives. That part sounds hard, right? But I think more to your point, again, if we think about financial education as teaching knowledge, so what is a policy, what is a premium, all those sorts of things, but we have to also address attitudes. So if people, for whatever reason, don't see that they have personal responsibility for the risk, then in insurance education, that is the place to start. That you in fact do have personal responsibility for the risk, and here is how you'll see this play out in your lives if you don't address that and take that responsibility. That's harder than teaching what a policy is. That's much more difficult, and it clearly can't be done in a single session, and it perhaps is better done in informal education than in formal education.
Thank you. I think, Julia, this can apply to other, not only for insurance. In the daily life, I don't want someone to try to sell me something. I want to buy, but I don't want someone pushing me to buy their product. But maybe it's important to, if there is some information that can let me know what are my needs, I am going to change my mind, because maybe if the same person comes to me and explains me that there is a particular insurance product that can fill my needs, I will be very happy, because I am going to understand that I need that product and I want to buy that. But it's different. It's like the behavior, maybe giving more information to try to understand that we have some needs and there are some products. But it's interesting.
Just to follow up on that, as educators, we sometimes talk about things that are taught and things that are caught. So I put you in a room and I teach you, but there are many things we learn without being in a classroom. We just learn them from being exposed to our families, our peers, our media. Some of those things are things we probably need to know, and some of those things are things that we probably shouldn't know. But I think insurance is often taught, not caught, compared to some other parts of money management like credit and banking and things you're much more likely to learn about from your personal life. So I guess we should all go out and talk about insurance more.
Thank you. Do you have a question?
Hello, I'm Matusz Medvek from National Bank of Slovakia. I would like to pose one question to Mimosa regarding the borders of the mandates of regulatory or supervisory authorities. I think that primary objective of majority of supervisory and regulatory authority is to protect financial market as such, which is our core and direct responsibility. And directly, financial education is closely related to this. And my question is, where do you see these borders? Where is our responsibility to interact with the mandate of educational ministry, which is responsible I think that in general, in many countries, for setting the educational policy. Because I think that regulatory authorities should be primarily responsible for their main role, and their secondary responsibility should be somehow limited. And what is your view on that?
So in our case, this is a policy on national level. This is a policy where a lot of public institutions will be included. So the Ministry of Finance is included, our supervisor, the Financial Supervisory Authority, the Bank of Albania, and we are coordinating the work together. So it's not a legal requirement. It's not in the law, but we see that there is a need to improve the knowledge of the general public. Of course, the students and in the school, in the high schools, we cannot have now the positive outcomes, but they are potential consumers in the future. And it's important to make them aware on insurance topics. And so in our case, it's a national policy supported by a lot of institutions, but also the stakeholders in the market.
Thank you. Maybe one more question or two, Peter? Well, please.
Thank you.
Yes, just two questions.
To me?
The first one and the last one.
Yeah, thank you. David Townsend, Andrew Moore and Associates Fire Investigation in Singapore. In 40 years in the fire industry, I have seen many properties completely lost through by non-insurers, and it is, in the vast majority, it's a social issue, as outlined by Brenda. Every one of those losses has been a burden on the state. Has the panel aware, or any member aware, of any government or local government initiative that will provide assistance to general insurance? There's government assistance for housing and benefit, health, even food, not for general insurance. But all of these losses are a burden on the state. In terms of also with the product, one of the issues with insurance is selling the product. It's not just about the cost, mostly it is, but it's also overcoming a certain amount of cynicism that still exists.
Well, I will address the second part and hope the others can address the first part. Just to say that, realize when you sell an insurance product, you're asking people to pay an amount of money now, for sure, for the possibility of some payoff later. And human nature is that we're all overconfident, so we typically all underestimate the likelihood of that payoff. That's a very challenging task when you present it in that way. And getting people to enthusiastically purchase insurance product is a hard thing to do. But as for the first part of the question, do either of you have a response?
Yeah, if understood, is about if there are countries that provide assistance for general insurance, so non-life, right? General or non-life insurance are synonyms. I would say yes. What comes to my mind is agriculture insurance, right? I mean, and without assistance, there would be no insurance for the farmer. Now, too much assistance means 100% subsidies. There's no business for the private sector, right? Unless, like India, is a big example, I think, worldwide, good example, where subsidies are also given to the private sector. There are bidding processes for agriculture insurance. Unfortunately, in the Philippines, where I'm based, this is not the case. The agriculture insurance is fully subsidized, and there is no room for the private industry to step in, not yet, unless the rules of the game and the political economy will allow this to happen. So yes, agriculture insurance not only needs subsidies, but to a level, smart subsidies we call them, where they can also say that, okay, this year we take up 70% of the premium, but next year you will pay 40% or 50%, so reducing slowly the subsidies. Otherwise the farmers will get spoiled, and they will wait, or they will not get any insurance, and of course they will not take care of their crops, because it's also not a matter of insuring, it's a matter of the farmer taking responsibility with the right fertilizers, the right time, so it's a behavioral issue. I'm not sure if somebody knows about other types of assistance, but that's, I think, quite a prominent case, agriculture insurance, a case for agriculture insurance.
Thank you very much. Yeah. Please.
Thank you. Ahmed from Oman. Do you think there are a correlation between the level of consumer education and the insurance companies and broker level of knowledge and professionalism? I think many consumers, they buy insurance because they need it. That doesn't mean they like it. That's why they didn't show much interest to education. And education is different than awareness. Educations need a hard effort to study. That's why it's big challenge. As a regulators, I think our responsibility is to protect the consumer. So we need to focus more on consumer protections by ensuring that the insurer themselves, the broker insurer, and even the banker in bank assurance scheme, for example, they are avoiding mis-sellings and they are well educated about the insurance product that they are distributing to the public. So how can we balance and how that can be achieved? Thank you.
I think financial education is consumer protection. It is arming all of your consumers to be more aware when there's a market situation that's not what it should be. I do think that, again, those coalitions are important, but honestly, consumers don't trust insurers in consumer education because the insurer has the profit motive. So again, this idea of specialization. The insurer can educate the educator who teaches the consumer. The regulator can put together the coalitions and develop policies that encourage or demand education. But in terms of your comment about who wants to learn about insurance, I agree with that. So that's again why I would encourage insurance education to be integrated into financial education. I really want to know more. I'm about to buy a house. Well, not just the financing of the mortgage or whatever, but also that insurance is required and involved. And so I think that's the better way to introduce insurance education as a component of larger financial education. But it's often ignored because the financial educator doesn't know enough about insurance to include it.
Thank you. Thank you very much. To finish, what will be your final message that you would like to give to the IAIS regarding the issue of financial regulation?
Since we have a lot of regulators, supervisors with us, I would like to pass a message to the regulators based on our experience working now in Asia. You should take the lead in financial education. You are very well connected, and at the end of the day, if financial education is consumer protection, as you said, you are actually interested on one side that the insurance company will not go bust, right? Solvency, yeah, they continue business. On the other hand, that the consumer, the policyholder at the end, gets what he was promised in the right time, yeah, in the right amount. So I also understand, and this is my message very shortly here, that there are attempts, but there is less harmony in your group, in your association, in coming up with the guidelines on financial literacy or education. They might come in the future, but on the other hand, you work more in the direction of consumer protection, which is also very, very welcomed. Yeah? So that would be my message. In order to promote financial education, regulators can do more and shall do more.
Thank you. Mimosa?
So we all should consider that financial education supports market development as well as the protection of the policyholders. So the regulators should be the leader of the process, but of course without the commitment of the stakeholders and other public institutions and the close collaborations with them, this might not happen. I'm very glad that I was here today, and I hope that the ideas expressed in this panel will help us to improve our financial education strategy and to protect better our consumers. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Brenda?
I too would like to say that I was honored to be invited to participate in this and encourage you to remember that there are educators and consumer researchers who have expertise that will make your efforts much more valuable. And I hope you will include us. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And please.